The baby's cry cut through Silver Ridge like a dying animal's last breath. Samuel Hollister stumbled into the market square, his infant daughter wrapped in a blood-stained blanket, her tiny face turning gray. He fell to his knees in the dust, holding her up like an offering to God. "Please," he begged the crowd gathering around him. "She's dying. Someone help me. Anyone." 70 faces stared back. Not one hand reached out. Because in this town, helping Sam Hollister meant touching a man they'd already decided was a murderer. Only one woman moved. The woman they'd spent 3 years destroying. Follow this story to the end. Hit that subscribe button and comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this journey travels. Adelaide Crawford heard the commotion before she understood it. She was standing behind her pie table at the far corner of Silver Ridge's Market Square, the same corner she'd occupied every Tuesday and Saturday for 3 years. The corner furthest from the well, where respectable women gathered to exchange gossip. The corner where dust collected thickest and customers came quickest, taking their purchases without meeting her eyes. "2 pies," Mrs. Harmon said, dropping coins on the weathered wood. "Apple and cherry." "Yes, ma'am. Thank you kindly." Mrs. Harmon didn't wait for change, didn't acknowledge Adelaide's words, simply gathered her pies and walked away, as if proximity to Adelaide might leave a stain. Adelaide swept the coins into her apron pocket. Her hands didn't shake anymore. They'd learned stillness through 3 years of practice. She was arranging her remaining pies when the screaming started. "Help! Someone help me!" Adelaide's head snapped up. At the far end of the square, people were scrambling backward, creating an empty circle around something she couldn't see. "Please, she's dying!" A man burst through the crowd, tall, gaunt, wearing clothes that had seen better days. His dark hair hung wild across his forehead, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. In his arms, wrapped in a blanket that might have been white once, was a bundle so small it barely seemed real. Adelaide's breath stopped. She knew that bundle, knew the shape of it, the weight of it, the terrible stillness that came before the end. "She needs milk!" the man was shouting, turning in circles, his voice cracking on each word. "She won't take cow's milk. She won't take goat's milk. She needs a wet nurse. Please, someone, anyone!" The crowd pulled back further. "That's Sam Hollister," someone muttered near Adelaide's table. "The one who killed his wife." "Didn't kill her," another voice corrected, "but might as well have. Kept her locked up at that ranch, wouldn't let no one near. Poor woman died in childbirth with no help at all. I heard he went crazy after, buried her in the yard like an animal." Adelaide watched Sam Hollister turn toward a cluster of women near the fabric merchant's stall. His movement was jerky, uncoordinated, the movement of a man running on nothing but desperation. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, his voice breaking, "please, I know you're nursing your youngest. I can pay anything you want." Margaret Patterson's husband stepped forward, putting himself between Sam and his wife. "You need to leave, Hollister. Now." "I ain't asking for myself. It's for my daughter. She's 3 weeks old and she's dying. Look at her." Sam pulled back the blanket, revealing a face so small, so gray, that Adelaide felt her stomach lurch. "She ain't done nothing wrong. She's just a baby." "Should have thought about that before you killed her mama," someone called from the crowd. "I didn't kill anyone." Sam's voice rose to something close to a scream. "Josephine died bringing grace into this world. That's all. That's the only truth there is." "Then why won't you let nobody on your land?" Thomas Brennan, the blacksmith, crossed his arms over his massive chest. "Why you keep everyone away? What you hiding up there?" "I ain't hiding nothing. I'm trying to keep my daughter alive." Sam's legs seemed to give out. He sank to his knees in the dust, the baby clutched against his chest. Please, I'm begging you. Someone, anyone. She's all I got left of Josephine. She's all I got left of anything good." The baby's cry rose thin and weak, a sound Adelaide knew too well. The sound of a life slipping away. "Pathetic," Mrs. Cordelia Ashworth's voice cut through the murmuring crowd. The widow of Judge Ashworth stepped forward, her gray hair pinned in an elaborate style, her black dress proclaiming permanent mourning for a husband dead 5 years. Using an innocent child to manipulate decent people. That baby would be better off with a proper Christian family than with a man of your character. She's my daughter. She's a child in danger. The Ladies' Aid Society has already discussed this matter. There are families willing to take her, families who can provide proper care. Over my dead body. That can be arranged, Mrs. Ashworth smiled, thin and cold. The territorial authorities take a dim view of men who can't care for their children, especially men with your reputation. Sam struggled to his feet, clutching Grace tighter. I just need a wet nurse, that's all. Just someone to help feed her until she's strong enough for regular milk. I can pay. I got money. Your money is as tainted as your hands, Mr. Hollister. Adelaide felt something shifting in her chest. Something that had been locked away for 3 years, buried under layers of shame and silence and careful invisibility. The baby's cry weakened, became a whimper, then almost nothing at all. She's fading, Sam whispered, staring down at his daughter. Oh God, she's fading. Gracie, baby, hold on. Papa's here. Papa's trying. Papa's... His voice broke into a sob. Adelaide's feet moved before her mind gave permission. The crowd parted around her, not from respect, but from habit. They'd learned long ago to step aside when Adelaide Crawford walked past, as if her grief might be contagious. She crossed the market square, her heart pounding, her breath short. She knew what would happen if she did this. Knew the gossip would multiply. The judgment would intensify. The careful invisibility she'd cultivated would shatter completely. But that sound, that tiny, weakening cry, she knew that sound. Give her to me. Sam's head snapped up, his eyes, red-rimmed and desperate, focused on Adelaide's face. What? Give her to me. Adelaide held out her arms. Now, before it's too late. Who are you? Someone who might be able to help. That's all that matters. Behind her, Adelaide heard Mrs. Ashworth's sharp intake of breath. Adelaide Crawford, you cannot be serious. You of all people. I didn't ask your opinion, Cordelia. Adelaide kept her eyes on Sam, on the tiny bundle in his arms. I asked for the baby. Give her to me. Can you help her? Can you actually? I don't know. Adelaide's honesty surprised even herself. I don't know if I can help. My son died 3 years ago. My milk dried up after. But sometimes, she swallowed hard, sometimes the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Sam stared at her broad face, her thick body straining against her faded calico dress, her work-roughened hands reaching toward his daughter. You'd try? Even though you don't know if it'll work? She'll die for certain if I don't try. That seems like enough reason. Sam placed Grace in Adelaide's arms. The weight of her was nothing. 4 pounds, maybe less. Adelaide could feel every fragile bone, every desperate breath. The baby's eyes flickered open, dark blue and unfocused, searching for something her failing body couldn't find. Hello, little one, Adelaide whispered. Let's see if we can help each other. This is obscene. Mrs. Ashworth's voice rose above the murmuring crowd. The Crawford woman can't possibly help that child. She couldn't even keep her own baby alive. Adelaide felt the words hit like physical blows. But she didn't stop. didn't look back. "I need somewhere private," she said to Sam. "Somewhere quiet. I got a room at the boarding house. We could—" "Mrs. Griswold won't allow it. She barely tolerates me as it is." Adelaide's mind raced through options. "The church. It'll be empty this time of day." "The church?" Sam's voice cracked with something like hysterical laughter. "You want to try to save my daughter in the church? After everything this town said about me?" "God don't care what they say, and neither do I." Adelaide started walking. Sam followed, stumbling to keep up, his eyes fixed on his daughter's face. Behind them, the market square erupted into furious whispers. "Did you see that? The Crawford woman just—" "Bold as brass, walking off with that man's baby." "She's as crazy as he is." "Like to like, I always say." The church door creaked when Adelaide pushed it open. Cool, dusty air greeted them, along with a familiar scent of old wood and candle wax. She moved to the front pew, settling herself with Grace cradled against her chest. "Close the door," she told Sam, "and pray if you know how." "I ain't much for praying." "Then just hope. That works too." Adelaide unbuttoned the front of her dress with trembling fingers. Her breasts had gone soft and slack after her milk dried up. Another reminder of failure. Another mark of inadequacy. She positioned Grace, guiding the baby's mouth toward her nipple, and waited. Nothing happened. Grace's mouth moved weakly against Adelaide's skin, searching but finding nothing. Her whimpers grew fainter. "Come on," Adelaide whispered. "Come on, little one. I know it's been a long time." "I know I ain't what you need, but please, please try." Sam stood in the aisle, his hands clenched at his sides, his whole body rigid with hope and terror. "Is it working? Can you—" "Hush." Adelaide closed her eyes. She thought about her son, about the 2 days she'd held him, feeding him from her body, feeling the miraculous pull of his hunger, the warmth of his small form against her chest. She thought about the moment he stopped breathing, about the terrible silence that followed, about the milk that kept coming for weeks after, a cruel reminder of what she'd lost. She'd hated her body for that, for producing what nobody needed, for continuing to function when everything else had stopped. But now, a tingling sensation spread through her chest, unfamiliar, achingly familiar. Grace's mouth sealed around Adelaide's nipple, and then, miracle, the baby began to suck. "Oh God!" Sam's voice came out strangled. "Oh God, is she—" "She's feeding." Adelaide opened her eyes, looking down at the infant whose tiny hand had uncurled against her breast, whose eyes had drifted closed with the focus of a child finally getting what she needed. "She's actually feeding." The pull was sharp, almost painful after so long. But Adelaide didn't flinch. She felt the milk letting down, felt her body remembering its purpose, felt something cracking open in her chest that had been sealed shut for 3 years. Sam collapsed onto the pew beside her, his face buried in his hands. His shoulders shook with sobs he couldn't control. "Thank you." The words came muffled through his fingers. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Adelaide kept her eyes on Grace, on the pink slowly returning to gray cheeks, on the strengthening rhythm of suckling and swallowing, on the tiny life pulling back from the edge of death. "Don't thank me yet," she said quietly. "We ain't out of the woods. She's going to need to eat every few hours. She's so small, probably every 2 hours at least, and I don't know how long my milk will last. Don't know if my body can keep up. But she's eating now. She's alive. She's alive." Sam lifted his head. His face was wet, his eyes swollen, but something had changed in his expression. The desperate terror had eased into something like wonder. "I don't even know your name." "Adelaide. Adelaide Crawford." Crawford. Sam's brow furrowed. The widow? The one whose husband walked into the mountains and never came back? Yes, that's me. People said. People say a lot of things. Adelaide adjusted Grace, feeling the baby sucking slow as she drifted toward sleep. Most of it ain't true, but that don't stop them from saying it. They say things about me, too. I know. Silence stretched between them, broken only by Grace's soft sounds of contentment. Adelaide shifted her to the other breast, watching the baby latch again, with less desperation this time, more certainty. What happened to your son? Sam asked quietly. If you don't mind me asking. He came too early. Lungs weren't ready. He lived 2 days. Adelaide kept her voice steady, though the words still cut. The midwife said there was nothing anyone could have done. But William, my husband, he couldn't accept that. Couldn't look at me without seeing what we'd lost. So he left. And the town blamed you. The town needed someone to blame. I was convenient. Adelaide looked up, meeting Sam's eyes. I'm guessing you understand how that works. Better than most, Sam's jaw tightened. Josephine died giving birth. 4 days of labor. The baby turned wrong. No doctor for 50 miles. I did everything I could. Held her hand, wiped her forehead, prayed every prayer I knew. But in the end, he stopped, swallowed hard. In the end, she just slipped away, and Grace was so tiny, so fragile, I thought I'd lose them both. But you didn't. Not yet. Sam's eyes dropped to his daughter, now sleeping peacefully against Adelaide's breast. Thanks to you. The church door creaked. Both Adelaide and Sam turned to see Mrs. Griswold, the boarding house landlady, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed and her face set in familiar disapproval. I thought I'd find you here. The narrow woman stepped inside, her eyes sweeping over the scene with obvious distaste. The whole town's talking, Adelaide. Running off with that man, bringing him to a church of all places. I'm feeding a starving baby, Harriet, in a house of God. If you got a problem with that, take it up with the Almighty. Mrs. Griswold's nostrils flared. You're making a spectacle of yourself. Wouldn't be the first time. This is different. This man is dangerous. Everyone knows what he did to his wife. Everyone knows rumors and gossip. Adelaide kept her voice calm, though anger was building in her chest. Nobody knows the truth, because nobody bothered to ask. The truth is that Josephine Hollister died alone at that ranch, with no help and no witnesses. The truth is that he buried her in the yard before anyone could examine the body. The truth is my wife asked to be buried where she could see the mountains. Sam's voice was low, dangerous. The truth is, I had a 3-day-old baby to keep alive, and no time for your town's proper procedures. The truth is, I loved Josephine more than my own life, and I'd give anything to have her back. Mrs. Griswold drew herself up. Nevertheless, get out. Adelaide's interruption silenced both of them. I mean it, Harriet. Get out of this church and leave us be. I'll deal with the consequences of my choices, same as I always have. But right now, this baby needs quiet, and you ain't providing it. Mrs. Griswold's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For a long moment, Adelaide thought she might argue. But something in Adelaide's face, or maybe something in Sam's, convinced her otherwise. Don't expect any favors from me after this, Mrs. Griswold said, backing toward the door. You've made your bed, Adelaide Crawford. Don't come crying to me when you have to lie in it. The door slammed behind her. Sam let out a breath. She's going to make your life hell, ain't she? She already does. Not much further down she can push me." Adelaide looked at Grace, at the peaceful face of a baby who'd been dying an hour ago and was now sleeping contentedly. "Besides, some things are worth the cost. You could have stayed invisible, could have let Grace die and kept your head down and spent the rest of my life knowing I let another baby die because I was too scared to help." Adelaide's voice caught. "I already carry one death I couldn't prevent. I won't carry one I chose to ignore." Sam was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. "How long will she need to eat like this? How long before she's strong enough for regular milk?" "A month, maybe. Maybe longer. Depends on how fast she grows, how strong she gets." "A month." Sam processed this. "I can't stay in town for a month. I got a ranch to run, stock to tend, work that don't wait." "I know. But I can't take her back without—" He stopped, his face twisting with the realization of what he was about to ask. "God, I can't believe I'm even thinking this. We just met. I don't know anything about you except that you saved my daughter's life. But Adelaide—" "You want me to come with you?" "I ain't got another option. There ain't another woman in 50 miles who'd help me. And even if there was, Grace has already latched onto you. What if she won't take from anyone else? What if you're the only one who can—" "I'll come." Sam blinked. "What?" "I said, I'll come." Adelaide shifted Grace to her shoulder, patting the baby's back gently. "You're right. There ain't another option. And I ain't got much here worth staying for anyway. But your home, your business, my business is selling pies to people who won't look at my face. My home is a room I rent from a woman who charges me double because she thinks my presence might scare off respectable boarders." Adelaide stood, Grace still secure in her arms. "That ain't a life, Sam. That's just surviving. And I'm tired of just surviving." Sam stood too, something changing in his expression. Not hope exactly. He was too battered for hope. But maybe the first stirring of it. "My ranch is 25 miles from here. Rough country, rough road. Takes most of a day by wagon. I can manage rough. The house it ain't much. I ain't been keeping up with things since Josephine. I can manage that too. People will talk. They already think the worst of me. If you come with me, unmarried, staying at my ranch—" "Let them talk." Adelaide met his eyes, feeling something shifting inside her. Something that had been frozen for 3 years, finally starting to thaw. "I've been letting people's talk dictate my life for too long. Maybe it's time I stopped." Sam stared at her. At this woman he'd met an hour ago, who'd risked her reputation to save his daughter, who was now offering to upend her entire existence for a baby who wasn't hers and a man she barely knew. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you do this? After everything you've been through, everything you've lost, why would you risk more?" Adelaide looked down at Grace, at the tiny face relaxed in sleep, at the small hand curled against her chest. "Because she needed me, and her voice caught, "and I needed to be needed. More than I knew." Grace stirred, making small sounds in her sleep. Adelaide rocked her gently, automatically. Muscle memory from those 2 precious days with her own son, finally finding purpose again. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow, first light. I'll bring a wagon, pick you up at the boarding house. Best meet me at the edge of town. Harriet Griswold will cause trouble if she sees you coming for me." "The edge of town, then. You sure about this? Dead sure?" Adelaide thought about her room at the boarding house, about her pie table at the market, about 3 years of careful invisibility, of making herself small, of accepting the world's judgment about her worth. Then she thought about Grace's weight in her arms. about the miracle of milk flowing from her body after so long, about the way this baby had looked at her, trusting, needing, claiming her as the source of life. "I'm sure," she said. "Surer than I've been about anything in a long time." The walk back to the boarding house was a gauntlet. Adelaide carried Grace, who'd woken and started fussing, while Sam walked beside her, his hand hovering near her elbow, as if ready to catch her if she fell. The market square had emptied of commerce, but filled with observers, people who'd finished their business, but hadn't finished their gawking. "There she goes! Bold as brass! Always knew there was something wrong with that one. Like to like, I always say." Adelaide kept walking, her head high, her shoulders back. Her body, for once, taking up exactly as much space as it needed, without apology. Mrs. Ashworth stepped into their path. "You're making a terrible mistake, Adelaide." The older woman's voice was pitched to Carrie, to ensure the whole square could hear. "That man is dangerous. That child belongs with decent people. And you," her lip curled, "you're in no position to be caring for anyone's baby. We all know what happened to yours." Adelaide stopped. For 3 years, she'd absorbed comments like this, accepted them, let them sink into her skin and settle in her bones, becoming part of who she believed herself to be. Not today. "My son died because his lungs weren't developed, Cordelia." The midwife confirmed it. The doctor from Helena confirmed it. The only person who ever said otherwise was you, whispering in corners, spreading poison because you got nothing better to do with your time. Mrs. Ashworth's face went rigid. "How dare you? I dare because I'm done. Done letting you and your cronies decide what I'm worth. Done apologizing for surviving when you think I should have crawled off somewhere and died of shame." Adelaide's voice rose, and she let it. "Grace Hollister was dying an hour ago. Every single one of you turned your backs. I stepped forward. I helped. That's the only truth that matters here. The truth is that you're an unstable woman with a history of failure, and that child is alive because of me." Adelaide stepped closer, close enough to see the fear flicker in Mrs. Ashworth's eyes. "And she's going to stay alive because of me. So you can spread whatever gossip you want. You can whisper and point and judge. But at the end of the day, when you look in the mirror, you'll know the truth. You let a baby almost die because helping her meant helping a man you'd already decided to hate. I didn't. That's the difference between us, Cordelia. That's the only difference that matters." She stepped around the older woman and kept walking. Behind her, she heard Sam's footsteps following, heard the shocked silence of the crowd, heard her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, loud and fast and alive. At the boarding house, Mrs. Griswold was waiting on the porch. "I've already packed your things." The landlady's voice was cold. "You're not welcome here anymore, Adelaide. Not after today's display." That was fast. "I've been looking for an excuse to be rid of you for years. You've finally given me one." Mrs. Griswold gestured to a battered trunk sitting beside the door. "Take your things and go. I'll expect this month's rent in full, of course, for the trouble you've caused." "Of course." Adelaide handed Grace to Sam, who took her with the careful awkwardness of a man still learning to hold his own child. She dug in her apron pocket, counted out coins, placed them in Mrs. Griswold's waiting palm. "There, we're square. We'll never be square. You've made a mockery of my establishment. Your establishment made a mockery of itself years ago. I was just the easiest target." Adelaide picked up her trunk, lighter than it should be for a life's possessions, and turned to Sam. "Looks like I ain't got a reason to wait until tomorrow after all." Sam's eyes widened. "You want to leave now? Got a better idea?" He looked at Grace, at Adelaide, at the hostile faces gathered around them. His jaw tightened. "My wagon's at the livery. Give me 10 minutes. I'll wait at the edge of town, the big oak by the north road. Sam nodded. Then, surprising Adelaide, surprising everyone watching, he reached out and touched her arm. Just briefly. Just enough to convey something words couldn't express. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For everything. For her." "Don't thank me yet. We ain't home free." "No, but we're closer than we were this morning." Adelaide watched him walk toward the livery, Grace nestled against his chest, his stride longer and stronger than it had been when he'd stumbled into the market square, begging for help. Then she picked up her trunk and started walking north. The crowd parted around her, same as always. But this time, it felt different. This time, the parting felt less like exclusion and more like acknowledgement. Less like invisibility and more like being seen. She reached the oak tree and set down her trunk. The late afternoon sun slanted through the branches, painting patterns on the dusty road. In the distance, she could hear Silver Ridge going about its business, carrying on as if nothing had changed. But something had changed. Adelaide pressed her hand against her chest, feeling the tenderness of breasts that had woken up after 3 years of sleep. Feeling the ache that meant life, that meant purpose, that meant she was finally needed again. A wagon appeared around the bend, Sam at the reins, Grace presumably secure in some kind of makeshift bed in the back. He pulled up beside Adelaide and jumped down to load her trunk. "You sure about this?" he asked one more time. "Once we leave, there ain't no going back." Adelaide looked at the road behind her, at the town that had spent 3 years grinding her down, at the life she'd built from the ruins of everything she'd lost, small, careful, invisible. Then she looked at the road ahead, at the mountains rising in the distance, at the man waiting to help her into the wagon, at the baby who needed her. "I'm sure," she said. She climbed up onto the wagon seat. Sam climbed up beside her. He clicked his tongue, and the horses started forward. Behind them, Silver Ridge grew smaller with every turn of the wheels. Adelaide didn't look back. Not once. There was nothing back there she needed anymore. Ahead, the road stretched toward mountains and uncertainty and the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of becoming someone new. Grace began to cry from the wagon bed. "She's hungry again," Adelaide said, already shifting to climb into the back. "Pull over. I need to feed her." Sam guided the horses to the side of the road without question, without judgment, without any of the careful disgust Adelaide had grown accustomed to seeing in people's eyes. She settled into the wagon bed, lifted Grace, began the now familiar process of positioning and latching. The baby's cries stopped immediately, replaced by the rhythmic sounds of feeding. From the driver's seat, Sam watched them with an expression Adelaide couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. It's just—" He shook his head. "This morning, I thought I was going to lose her. I thought I was going to have to dig another grave, bury another person I love, walk away from everything I'd built because there was nothing left worth staying for. And now? Now I don't know what happens next, but for the first time in weeks, that don't feel like a death sentence." Sam turned back to face the road ahead. "That feels like maybe it could be something else." "Like what?" "Like a chance. Like a second chance neither of us earned, but got anyway." Adelaide looked down at Grace, at the baby who'd been dying in a market square and was now drinking deeply, strongly, hungrily from Adelaide's body. A second chance. She'd stopped believing in those years ago. Stopped believing in much of anything except the day-to-day work of survival. But maybe, she thought, watching the colors of sunset begin to paint the sky, maybe it was time to start believing again. The wagon creaked through darkening roads for hours. Adelaide fed Grace twice more before they finally turned off the main trail onto a narrow path that wound through dense pine forest. The baby slept now, warm against Adelaide's chest, her breathing deep and even for the first time since Adelaide had taken her. "Almost there," Sam said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Another mile or so." Adelaide nodded, though he couldn't see her in the darkness. Her body ached from the jarring wagon ride, her breasts tender from feeding, her mind spinning with the enormity of what she'd done. This morning, she'd been selling pies in a market square corner. Now she was riding toward a stranger's ranch, carrying a baby who wasn't hers, having burned every bridge she'd ever built. The trees opened suddenly, and even in the moonlight, Adelaide could see the valley stretching before them. Mountains rose like dark sentinels against the star-filled sky. A creek caught silver light as it wound through meadow grass. And at the valley's heart, barely visible in the darkness, sat a cabin. Sam guided the wagon to a stop in front of the porch. For a long moment, neither of them moved. "I should warn you," he said quietly. "It ain't pretty inside. I've been trying to keep up with things, but there's only so much one man can do when he's also trying to keep a baby alive on sugar water and hope. I ain't expecting pretty. I know. He climbed down, came around to help her from the wagon. His hands at her waist were careful, respectful, lifting her as if her size was nothing. "I want you to know I ain't always been this way. This mess, this chaos. Josephine and we built something good here, something real. I believe you." Sam lit a lantern and led her inside. The cabin was one large room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, a cook stove with a pile of unwashed dishes beside it. 2 doors led to what Adelaide assumed were bedrooms. Everything was covered in a layer of dust and neglect, the debris of a man too exhausted and grief-stricken to do more than simply exist. But Adelaide had learned to see past surfaces. "Good bones," she said, looking around. "Solid construction. This place just needs some care is all." Sam's shoulders dropped slightly, some tension releasing. "The bedroom on the left was going to be the nursery. I've been sleeping in there with Grace, in case she needed me in the night. The other room—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "That was me and Josephine's room. I ain't been able to go back in there. Not yet." "That's all right. I can sleep in the nursery with Grace. Makes sense anyway, since she'll need feeding through the night." "You sure? The bed's narrow. Ain't comfortable." "I've slept in worse." Adelaide moved to the fireplace, checking the flue, assessing the wood supply. "You got enough fuel to last the night?" "Should be. I'll bring in more tomorrow." "Good. Then you should get some sleep. You look about ready to fall over." Sam stared at her, something shifting in his expression. "You're already taking charge." "Someone's got to." Adelaide turned to face him, Grace still sleeping against her shoulder. "Look, Sam, I don't know what this is between us. I don't know how long it'll last or what it'll become. But I know one thing for certain. That baby needs stability. She needs someone making decisions, keeping things running, making sure her world don't fall apart. You're too tired and too grieved to do it alone right now. So let me help. That's why I'm here." "I thought you were here to feed her." "I'm here because she needed me. Turns out, maybe you do too." Sam was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. "Josephine used to say something like that. That needing help wasn't weakness. That partnership meant letting someone carry part of the load." "Sounds like a smart woman." "She was. Smartest person I ever knew." Sam moved toward the smaller bedroom, his movements heavy with exhaustion. "Good night, Adelaide, and thank you for everything." "Good night, Sam." Adelaide listened to his door close, then stood alone in the dark cabin, holding a baby who wasn't hers, in a house that belonged to a dead woman, wondering what on earth she'd gotten herself into. Grace stirred, making small sounds of hunger. "All right, little one," Adelaide whispered, settling into a rocking chair that sat near the cold fireplace. Let's get you fed. Then we'll figure out the rest." The first week passed in a blur of feeding and cleaning and trying to restore order to chaos. Adelaide woke every few hours to nurse Grace, her body responding with increasing abundance, her milk coming in fuller and richer with each passing day. The baby thrived visibly, her face filling out, her cries growing stronger, her periods of wakefulness extending from minutes to hours. Between feedings, Adelaide attacked the cabin with the same determination she'd once applied to building her pie business. She scrubbed dishes that had accumulated for weeks, swept floors, washed windows until sunlight poured through clean glass. She organized the larder, aired out bedding, hung herbs to dry from the ceiling beams. Sam worked from dawn until dusk, repairing fences, tending livestock, catching up on months of deferred maintenance. But he came inside for meals now, sat at the table Adelaide had begun to set with care, ate food that nourished rather than simply sustained. "He didn't have to do all this," he said on the fourth evening, looking around at the transformed cabin. "You're here for Grace, not to be my housekeeper. I'm here to help keep this household running so Grace has a chance to thrive. That means more than just feeding her." Adelaide set a plate of biscuits on the table, fresh from the oven. "Besides, I like having something to do. Keeps my hands busy, keeps my mind from spinning too much." "What does your mind spin about?" Adelaide hesitated. Then, surprising herself, she told him the truth. "About what happens next. About what I've given up and whether it was worth it. About whether this can actually work, or whether I'm just fooling myself." Sam set down his fork, giving her his full attention. "Do you regret coming?" "No." The answer came quickly, certainly. "Every time I look at Grace, every time I see how much stronger she's getting, I know I made the right choice. But that don't mean I ain't scared." "Scared of what?" "Of hoping for too much. Of letting myself believe this could be real, could last, could become something more than just temporary arrangement." Adelaide's voice caught. "I spent 3 years learning not to hope, Sam. Learning that wanting things just led to losing them. It's hard to unlearn that, even when I want to." Sam was quiet for a moment. Then he reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. "I know something about that," he said quietly. "About being afraid to hope. About thinking the best parts of life are behind you. But Adelaide, what you've done this week, for Grace, for this house, for me, that ain't temporary. That's real. And whatever comes next, I want you to know that." Adelaide felt tears prickling her eyes. She blinked them back, focused on the warmth of his hand on hers. "Tell me about Josephine," she said. "I mean, really tell me. Not just the facts, but who she was. What she was like." Sam's hand tightened on hers, but he didn't pull away. "She was fierce," he said, quick-tempered when she saw injustice, slower to anger about personal slights. She taught herself to shoot because she said women on the frontier couldn't afford to be helpless. Then outshot me consistently and weren't shy about mentioning it. Adelaide smiled, despite herself. "Sounds like quite a woman." She was. She read everything she could get her hands on. Newspapers, books, seed catalogs, anything with words. She wanted to start a school out here eventually. Teach children whose families couldn't afford to send them to town. "That's a beautiful dream." "It was our dream. Both of ours." Sam's voice roughened. She also snored something terrible. Denied it completely. Got genuinely offended when I mentioned it. She burned the first 3 attempts at making bread and threw the 4th loaf out the window in frustration. She was terrified of spiders, but would catch them in a jar and release them outside, because she said killing something just for being different was wrong. Adelaide felt something shifting in her chest. This wasn't just a dead woman anymore, a ghost whose presence haunted every corner of this cabin. This was a real person, complicated and flawed, and deeply loved. "She sounds extraordinary," Adelaide said softly. She was, and I ain't trying to replace her. Sam met Adelaide's eyes, his gaze direct and honest. "I want you to know that. Whatever this is between us, whatever it becomes, I ain't looking for a replacement for Josephine." "I know, and I ain't looking to be one." Adelaide turned her hand over, clasping his fingers properly. "I just want to help, to be useful, to build something that matters, even if it looks different from what either of us imagined." They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined, something shifting between them that neither was ready to name. Then Grace's cry split the evening quiet, and they separated naturally, returning to the rhythms of caregiving that had become their shared language. The trouble arrived on the 8th day. Adelaide was hanging laundry on a line Sam had strung between two pines when she heard wagon wheels approaching. She straightened, shielding her eyes against the midday sun, and felt her stomach drop. 3 wagons rolled into the valley, and leading them, sitting ramrod straight in the first wagon's seat, was Mrs. Cordelia Ashworth. "Sam!" Adelaide called toward the barn. "Sam, we got company!" He emerged quickly, his posture immediately defensive. His eyes found the wagons, and Adelaide saw his face go hard as stone. "Mrs. Ashworth," he said, as the lead wagon rolled to a stop. "Long way from Silver Ridge." "Concern for a child's welfare knows no distance, Mr. Hollister." The older woman climbed down with the help of 2 men Adelaide recognized as her sons, Marcus and Daniel. Both were big, their faces suggesting they weren't accustomed to hearing the word no. "Grace is fine. Better than fine. She's thriving." "So you say, but the Ladies' Aid Society has received troubling reports about the situation here." Mrs. Ashworth's eyes swept over Adelaide, lingering on her thick body, her work-roughened hands, her faded dress. "Reports that an unmarried woman of questionable reputation is living under your roof, caring for an infant she has no legal right to tend." "Adelaide saved Grace's life. She's got more right to tend her than anyone in your society." "That's a matter of opinion." Mrs. Ashworth produced a folded paper from her bag. "This is a petition for review of child welfare, signed by concerned citizens of Silver Ridge and supported by testimony from multiple witnesses. It requests a formal hearing to determine whether your daughter's current living situation serves her best interests." Adelaide felt the ground shift beneath her feet. A hearing, legal proceedings, the weight of community judgment brought to bear with the full force of territorial law. "You can't do this," Sam said, his voice low and dangerous. "You can't just take a man's child because you don't approve of his choices." "We're not taking anyone," Mrs. Ashworth smiled, thin and cold. "We're simply asking that proper authorities examine the situation. Surely you can't object to that. Unless you have something to hide." "I ain't got nothing to hide. What I got is a healthy baby and a household that's running better than it has in months. What you got is spite dressed up as concern." "Be careful, Mr. Hollister. Words spoken in anger have a way of being remembered in courtrooms." Mrs. Ashworth turned to Adelaide. "As for you, Miss Crawford, I'd encourage you to reconsider your position here. Your history of failure with your own child makes you particularly unsuitable for the care of someone else's. A judge is unlikely to see your presence as anything other than evidence of Mr. Hollister's poor judgment." Adelaide felt the familiar shame rising, the old wounds tearing open. But underneath it, something else was building. Something hot and fierce and long overdue. "My son died because he was born too early," Adelaide said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "That wasn't failure. That was tragedy. And I won't let you use my grief as a weapon against this baby or this family." "Family," Mrs. Ashworth laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. You're not family. You're a desperate woman who attached herself to a desperate man. There's nothing noble or legitimate about this arrangement. There's more legitimacy in this household than in all your committees and petitions combined." Adelaide stepped forward, and something in her expression made Mrs. Ashworth step back. "Grace was dying when I took her. Every single one of you turned your backs. Now she's thriving, and suddenly you're concerned about her welfare? That ain't concern. That's revenge." "This conversation is over." Mrs. Ashworth gathered her skirts with rigid dignity. "The hearing will take place in Pine Creek, 1 week from today. I suggest you use that time to prepare your defense. You'll need it." The wagons pulled away, dust settling in their wake. Adelaide stood watching until they disappeared into the trees, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "They're going to take her." Sam's voice was hollow. "They're going to find some judge, some law, some way to take her from me." "No," Adelaide turned to face him. "They ain't taking her. Not if I have anything to say about it." "What can we do? You heard her. They got petitions, witnesses, the whole weight of respectable society behind them. We got nothing but the truth, and the truth don't always win against people like that." Adelaide's mind raced, turning over possibilities, examining options from every angle. The same calculating mind that had learned to survive in Silver Ridge, that had found ways to exist within impossible boundaries, now turned its focus to this new problem. "There's one thing we could do," she said slowly, the solution forming even as she spoke. "One way to cut the legs out from under their whole argument." "What?" Adelaide met his eyes directly, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "We get married." Sam stared at her. "What?" "Think about it. Their whole case rests on the impropriety of our arrangement. Unmarried woman, unmarried man, living under the same roof with a baby. They're going to paint it as scandal, as evidence of poor moral character." Adelaide's words came faster as the logic clicked into place. "But if we're married, if I'm your wife, then it's just a family. Husband, wife, daughter. No scandal, no impropriety. Nothing for them to hang their case on." "Adelaide, you can't be serious. We barely know each other. We've been living under the same roof for a week." "I know. And I know this ain't how either of us imagined getting married. But Sam, what other choice do we have? You said it yourself. They're going to take her, unless we give them a reason they can't." Sam ran his hands through his hair, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. "It ain't fair to you. Marriage should be about love, about choosing someone because you want them, not because it's the only way to protect a child." "Maybe. But when has fair ever had anything to do with life on the frontier?" Adelaide's voice softened. "Sam, I ain't looking for romance. I ain't looking for some fairy tale ending where everything works out perfect. I'm looking for partnership, for shared purpose, for a chance to build something that matters. You and Grace, this ranch, this life we're already building together. That's worth protecting. That's worth fighting for." "And if it don't work? If we get married and things fall apart and you end up trapped in a life you never wanted? Then we figure it out. Together." Adelaide stepped closer, reaching out to take his hand. "I'd rather be trapped in a life where I matter than free in one where I don't. I'd rather risk everything for something real than play it safe and watch Grace get taken by people who don't love her." Sam looked down at their joined hands. His fingers tightened around hers. "You're sure about this? Absolutely sure?" "I'm sure I want Grace to stay with her father. I'm sure I want to keep being part of her life, of your life, of whatever we're building here. The rest," Adelaide shrugged, "the rest we figure out as we go." Sam was quiet for a long moment. When he looked up, something had shifted in his eyes. Not hope exactly, but maybe the first tentative steps toward it. "All right," he said. "We'll do it. We'll get married." "Really?" "Really. But Adelaide, I need you to understand something." His grip on her hand tightened. "I loved Josephine. I still love her. I probably always will. I can't promise you my heart, not the way a husband should. I ain't asking for your heart. I'm asking for your partnership, your respect, your commitment to making this work. The rest can come later, or not at all. Either way, it's enough." Sam nodded slowly. "Then we're agreed. I'll ride to Pine Creek tomorrow, find a judge or a minister, whoever's available. We'll get this done before the hearing." "And Mrs. Ashworth?" A grim smile crossed Sam's face. "We'll invite her. Let her see exactly what her meddling accomplished. Let her watch us become exactly the legitimate family she claimed we weren't." Adelaide felt something like laughter bubbling up in her chest, hysterical and relieved and terrified all at once. "We're really doing this." "We're really doing this." Grace's cry rose from inside the cabin, demanding attention that transcended legal strategies and desperate decisions. Adelaide turned toward the sound automatically, her body already responding to the rhythm of this baby's needs. "Go," Sam said. "Feed her. I'll start on dinner." Adelaide paused at the cabin door, looking back at this man she was about to marry. This stranger who'd stumbled into a market square with a dying baby and changed everything. "Sam?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for trusting me, for letting me be part of this." "Thank you for stepping forward when nobody else would." His voice was rough. "Whatever happens next, Adelaide, I want you to know, you've already saved us. Both of us. That matters more than I can say." Adelaide nodded, not trusting her voice, and went inside to feed the baby who'd brought them together. Behind her, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Tomorrow, everything would change again. But tonight, Grace was healthy, the cabin was warm, and two people who'd thought they had nothing left were discovering they might have everything to gain. Orchestrated climactic court hearing narrative, with emotional resolution and character transformation. Sam left before dawn the next morning, riding hard for Pine Creek to arrange the marriage. Adelaide spent the day trying to keep busy, feeding Grace, scrubbing floors that didn't need scrubbing, baking bread she didn't need to bake. Anything to keep her mind from spinning into panic about what she'd agreed to do. By late afternoon, she heard hoofbeats approaching. She rushed to the porch, Grace in her arms, expecting Sam. Instead, she found Maggie Foster climbing down from a tired-looking mare, her face pale but determined. "Mrs. Foster?" Adelaide stared at the blacksmith's wife from Silver Ridge. "What are you doing here?" "I had to come." Maggie's voice shook slightly. "I heard about the petition, about what Mrs. Ashworth is trying to do. And I couldn't just sit there and let it happen. How did you even find this place?" "Asked at the trading post in Pine Creek. Told them I had urgent business with Mr. Hollister." Maggie climbed the porch steps, her eyes fixed on Grace. "Oh my, look at her. She's so healthy now, so pink and strong." Adelaide felt a surge of fierce pride. "She's gained almost 2 pounds since I took her, eating like there's no tomorrow." "Because there almost wasn't one." Maggie's voice caught. "Adelaide, I need to tell you something. That day in the market square, when Mr. Hollister came begging for help, I wanted to step forward. I was nursing my own baby. I could have helped. But Thomas, my husband, he stopped me. Said it would ruin us, associating with a man like that. And I was too much a coward to argue." "You ain't got to explain yourself to me." "Yes, I do. Because that decision has haunted me every night since." Maggie's eyes filled with tears. "I watched you walk away with that dying baby, knowing everyone was going to tear you apart for it. And I thought, That should be me. That should be any one of us. But it wasn't. It was just you, the woman we'd all been treating like she was invisible. Adelaide didn't know what to say. She'd spent so long being dismissed by the women of Silver Ridge that kindness from one of them felt almost foreign. "Why are you really here, Maggie?" "Because I want to testify. At the hearing." Maggie straightened her shoulders, some of the trembling leaving her voice. "I want to tell that judge exactly what happened in the market square. How everyone refused to help. How you were the only one brave enough to do something. If Mrs. Ashworth is going to try to take Grace away from her father, she's going to have to do it over my witness. Your husband will be furious. Let him be. Some things matter more than Thomas's temper." Maggie reached out, touching Grace's downy hair with gentle fingers. "This baby matters more. You matter more. What's right matters more." Adelaide felt something crack open in her chest. For 3 years, she'd believed the women of Silver Ridge were unanimous in their contempt for her. That she was universally judged, universally dismissed, universally alone. But here was Maggie Foster, risking her marriage, her social standing, everything comfortable about her life, to stand up for the truth. "Thank you," Adelaide whispered. "I don't have better words. Just thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We ain't won nothing yet." Maggie squared her shoulders. "Now where's Mr. Hollister? We got a lot to plan before that hearing." Sam returned at dusk with news that Judge Marcus Whitfield would perform the marriage ceremony the next morning at the Pine Creek Trading Post. Jonas and Hattie Brennan, who ran the post, had agreed to serve as witnesses. "They didn't ask questions," Sam said, washing trail dust from his face while Adelaide set out dinner. "Just nodded and said they'd be there. Good people, the Brennans." "Unlike most folks in these parts," Maggie added. She'd been helping Adelaide cook, the two women falling into an easy rhythm of shared work. Sam looked at her, surprise flickering across his tired face. "Mrs. Foster, Adelaide told me you came to testify. It's a brave thing you're doing." "It's the right thing. Should have done it sooner." Maggie set a plate of biscuits on the table. "Now, we need to talk strategy. Mrs. Ashworth ain't going to give up easy. She's got too much invested in being right to back down now." They talked long into the night, planning their defense, anticipating arguments, preparing for every attack Mrs. Ashworth might launch. Maggie provided valuable intelligence about which Silver Ridge residents might be willing to speak against Mrs. Ashworth's narrative, and which ones were too afraid or too loyal to budge. "Judge Whitfield has a reputation for fairness," Sam said, "but he's also known for strict adherence to propriety. He ain't gonna like that Adelaide and I were living together, unmarried." "Which is why we're fixing that tomorrow," Adelaide replied. "By the time the hearing happens, we'll be husband and wife, legal and binding." "You're really gonna do it?" Maggie asked, her voice soft. "Marry him? Just like that?" Adelaide looked at Sam across the table. At this man she'd known for barely 2 weeks. At the father of the baby sleeping peacefully in the next room. "It ain't just like that," she said. "It's the best choice for Grace. The best choice for all of us." "But what about love?" "Love is a luxury," Adelaide said quietly. "Partnership is a necessity. And right now, partnership is enough." The next morning dawned gray and cold. Adelaide dressed in her best dress, the dark wool she'd packed for winter, and braided her hair with extra care. She looked at herself in the small mirror Sam had hung in her room and saw a woman she barely recognized. Not because she looked different. Her face was the same broad face it had always been. Her body the same thick body that had drawn stares and whispers her whole life. But something in her eyes had changed. Something that had been dead for 3 years was slowly coming back to life. Grace fussed in her cradle, demanding attention. Adelaide lifted her, settled her against her chest, felt the familiar weight and warmth. "Today's a big day, little one," she whispered. "Today, I become your mama. Officially, legally, forever." Grace cooed, her tiny hand grasping at Adelaide's braid. "I hope that's a yes." The ride to Pine Creek took most of the morning. Sam drove the wagon while Adelaide sat beside him. Grace bundled warm against the autumn chill. Maggie followed on her mare, having sent word to her husband that she was visiting a sick friend and wouldn't be back for several days. "He'll figure out the truth eventually," she'd said with grim acceptance, "but by then, it'll be too late for him to stop me." Jonas and Hattie Brennan were waiting at the trading post when they arrived. They were a weathered couple in their 60s, their faces kind, their handshakes firm. "Judge Whitfield's inside," Jonas said. "Ready when you are." "Any sign of Mrs. Ashworth?" Sam asked. "Not yet, though I expect she'll make an appearance before too long. Word travels fast in these parts." Sam helped Adelaide down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Their eyes met, and Adelaide saw her own nervous uncertainty reflected back at her. "Last chance to back out," he said quietly. "If you've changed your mind, I'll understand." "I ain't changed my mind." Adelaide straightened her shoulders. "Let's do this." The ceremony was brief and businesslike. Judge Whitfield, a lean man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner, spoke the traditional words without embellishment. Adelaide listened to the questions that would bind her to this man, this life, this future she couldn't have imagined a month ago. "Do you, Samuel James Hollister, take Adelaide Rose Crawford to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Adelaide Rose Crawford, take Samuel James Hollister to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Adelaide looked at Sam, at his tired eyes, his honest face, his hands that had carried a dying baby into a market square and begged for help when the world refused. "I do." "Then by the authority vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife." No kiss, no rings, no celebration. Just the scratch of the judge's pen as he filled out the certificate, the Brennans' signatures as witnesses, and the legal transformation of two strangers into something that resembled a family. "Congratulations," Judge Whitfield said, handing Sam the certificate. "I understand there's a hearing scheduled for tomorrow regarding your daughter's welfare." "Yes, sir." "I'll be presiding over that as well." The judge's expression gave nothing away. "I expect all parties to conduct themselves with decorum and respect for the proceedings." "We intend to, Your Honor." "Good. Then I'll see you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp." They barely finished loading back into the wagon when Mrs. Ashworth's carriage appeared at the edge of town. Adelaide watched the older woman climb down, her face tight with fury as she took in the scene. "What is the meaning of this?" Mrs. Ashworth demanded, striding toward them. "What have you done?" Sam held up the marriage certificate. "What does it look like?" "Adelaide and I got married. Legal and binding, just like you wanted." "This is a sham, a desperate ploy to circumvent proper oversight." "This is a man and his wife preparing to raise their daughter in a stable, loving home." Sam's voice was cold. "Exactly what you claim to want for Grace. Unless what you actually wanted was control, in which case I'm afraid you're out of luck." Mrs. Ashworth's face flushed dark red. "This changes nothing. The hearing will proceed. Questions will be asked about the speed of this marriage, about the true nature of your relationship, about whether this woman is fit to care for any child, let alone one that isn't hers by blood." "Then ask your questions," Adelaide said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "We'll answer them. All of them. And when we're done, everyone will see exactly what kind of woman you are, Cordelia. The kind who'd rather let a baby die than admit she was wrong about someone." Mrs. Ashworth's mouth opened and closed, But for once, no words came out. Sam clicked the reins and the wagon pulled away, leaving Mrs. Ashworth standing in the dusty street, her face a mask of impotent rage. The hearing the next morning drew a crowd that spilled out of the Pine Creek trading post and onto the street. Word had spread through the territory about the custody dispute, and people had come from miles around to witness the spectacle. Adelaide sat in the front row, Grace in her arms, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. Beside her, Sam sat rigid with tension, his hands clenched on his knees. Behind them, Maggie Foster waited to testify, her face pale but determined. Mrs. Ashworth had brought her own supporters. Marcus and Daniel Ashworth flanked their mother like guards. Mrs. Harmon from Silver Ridge sat nearby, along with Thomas Brennan the blacksmith, the minister from the Silver Ridge Church, and a doctor Adelaide didn't recognize. Judge Whitfield called the proceedings to order with a sharp bang of his gavel. This hearing has been convened to examine a petition regarding the welfare of Grace Josephine Hollister, infant daughter of Samuel Hollister. The petitioner claims the child's current living situation poses a risk to her well-being. We will hear testimony from both sides before rendering a decision. Mrs. Ashworth spoke first, her voice ringing with righteous conviction. Your Honor, we come before you today out of concern for an innocent child. Grace Hollister lost her mother at birth. Her father, while perhaps well-meaning, has demonstrated poor judgment in his choices of care for her. He has isolated himself from the community, refused assistance from proper channels, and most troublingly, has taken an unmarried woman of questionable reputation into his home. The woman is no longer unmarried, Judge Whitfield noted. Mr. Hollister and Mrs. Crawford were married yesterday in this very establishment. A marriage of convenience, Your Honor, a transparent attempt to legitimize an improper arrangement. The woman in question, Adelaide Crawford, has a history that raises serious questions about her fitness for motherhood. What history would that be? Mrs. Ashworth smiled, thin and cold. Her own child died in her care, Your Honor. Her husband subsequently took his own life, presumably driven to despair by his wife's inadequacies. The town of Silver Ridge can testify that Mrs. Crawford spent 3 years living as a social pariah, isolated and unstable. Is this really the woman we want caring for a vulnerable infant? Adelaide felt each word like a physical blow. The old shame rose in her throat, threatening to choke her. But then Grace stirred in her arms, making small sounds of contentment, and Adelaide remembered why she was here, what she was fighting for. She wasn't fighting for herself. She was fighting for this baby. Thomas Brennan testified next, his voice carrying the weight of community judgment as he described Adelaide's isolation in Silver Ridge, her refusal to participate in social functions, her general strangeness and unsuitability. Mrs. Harmon followed, speaking in dulcet tones about Adelaide's inability to keep her own child alive, implying, without quite stating, that Adelaide bore some responsibility for the tragedy. The doctor Mrs. Ashworth had brought testified about the risks of allowing an infant to be nursed by a woman with Adelaide's emotional instability, using medical terminology that sounded impressive but said nothing of substance. Through it all, Adelaide sat still, holding Grace, feeling the weight of judgment pressing down on her. Then it was their turn. Maggie Foster stood first, her voice shaking but clear. Your Honor, I was in the market square the day Mr. Hollister came begging for help. I saw everything that happened. I saw a father on his knees with a dying baby, pleading with anyone who would listen. And I saw every single person turn their backs. Including yourself, Mrs. Foster? Including myself, Maggie's voice caught. My own baby was nursing at the time. I could have helped. I wanted to help. But my husband stopped me, said it would ruin us socially, and I was too much a coward to argue. So why are you testifying now? Because Adelaide Crawford wasn't a coward. She stepped forward when everyone else stepped back. She took that dying baby and she saved her life. And now Mrs. Ashworth wants to punish her for it. Maggie's voice rose with conviction. That ain't protecting a child, Your Honor. That's revenge. Sam testified next, describing Josephine's death, his desperate attempts to keep Grace alive, his growing despair as door after door slammed shut. I went to everyone, he said, his voice rough. Every woman in Silver Ridge who was nursing, every family who might have had connections to a wet nurse. They all refused, not because they couldn't help, but because helping me meant associating with the rumors they'd spread about me. What rumors, Mr. Hollister? That I killed my wife, that I was dangerous, unstable, violent. Sam's jaw tightened. None of it was true. Josephine died in childbirth. 4 days of labor, the baby positioned wrong. No doctor within 50 miles. I held her hand and watched her slip away. And then I had to keep going, because our daughter needed me. And Mrs. Crawford? How did she come to be in your household? She offered to help when no one else would. She took Grace, not knowing if her body could even produce milk after 3 years, and she saved my daughter's life. Then, when I asked her to come to the ranch to continue nursing Grace, she gave up everything. Her home, her business, her reputation. She gave it all up for a baby who wasn't even hers. Why did you marry her? Sam looked at Adelaide, at the baby sleeping in her arms, at the woman who'd transformed his cabin from a tomb into a home. Because she's the best thing that's happened to Grace since Josephine died. Because she loves my daughter like her own. And because I couldn't stand by and let people who wouldn't lift a finger to help her destroy what she's built with us. Judge Whitfield turned to Adelaide. Mrs. Hollister, would you like to speak? Adelaide handed Grace to Sam, then stood on legs that threatened to buckle. She walked to the front of the room, feeling every eye on her. Feeling the weight of judgment, of expectation, of a lifetime of being found wanting. Your Honor, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Then she stopped, cleared her throat, started again. Your Honor, I've spent most of my life being told I wasn't enough. Not pretty enough, not thin enough, not proper enough. When my son died, the town decided it was my fault. When my husband walked into the mountains and never came back, they decided that was my fault too. For 3 years I lived in the margins, selling pies to people who wouldn't look at my face, renting a room from a woman who charged me double for the privilege of being tolerated. She paused, gathering her thoughts, pushing past the fear that wanted to silence her. Then Grace Hollister came into my life. A dying baby in a market square, surrounded by people who could have helped, but chose not to. And I thought, I can either stay invisible and let this child die, or I can step forward and face whatever consequences come. Adelaide's voice grew stronger. I stepped forward, and yes, my reputation suffered. Yes, I gave up everything I'd built. But look at her. She pointed at Grace, sleeping peacefully in Sam's arms. 3 weeks ago, she was dying. Gray skin, weak cries, fading by the minute. Now she's pink and healthy and thriving. She's gained 2 pounds. She laughs. She reaches for me when she's hungry and settles when I hold her. Adelaide turned to face Mrs. Ashworth directly. You want to talk about fitness for motherhood? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how every respectable woman in Silver Ridge turned their backs on a dying infant because helping her meant associating with a man they decided to hate. Let's talk about how your concern for Grace's welfare only appeared after I succeeded in saving her. Let's talk about how you're using a baby as a weapon to punish people who didn't bow to your judgment." "That's enough," Mrs. Ashworth snapped. "Your Honor, this woman is clearly unstable." "I ain't unstable," Adelaide's voice rose. "I'm angry. There's a difference. I'm angry that you'd let a baby die rather than admit you were wrong. I'm angry that you're using legal proceedings to accomplish what nature couldn't. I'm angry that I spent 3 years believing I was worthless because people like you told me I was." She turned back to Judge Whitfield, her whole body trembling, but her voice steady. "Your Honor, you can look at me and see what Mrs. Ashworth wants you to see. A fat woman, a failed mother, a social outcast who attached herself to a desperate man. Or you can look at Grace, at a baby who was dying and is now thriving, at the evidence of what love and care can accomplish when judgment steps aside." Adelaide took a deep breath. "I don't know what kind of mother I'll be in the long run. I don't know if this marriage will work, or if Sam and I will ever be more than partners raising a child together. But I know this. I love Grace Hollister. I'd die for her. I've already sacrificed everything else for her. And no amount of gossip or petitions or legal proceedings is going to change that." The room was silent when Adelaide finished. She walked back to her seat on legs that barely held her, took Grace from Sam's arms, felt the baby snuggle against her chest with absolute trust. Judge Whitfield was quiet for a long moment, his sharp eyes moving from Adelaide to Mrs. Ashworth to Grace. "I've heard testimony from both sides," he said finally. "I've heard accusations of unsuitability and claims of rescue. I've heard gossip presented as evidence and love presented as defense." He stood, gathering his papers. "In matters of child welfare, my primary concern is the well-being of the child in question. I see before me an infant who, by all accounts, was dying 3 weeks ago. That same infant is now healthy, thriving, and clearly bonded with the woman caring for her." Mrs. Ashworth started to rise. "Your Honor, I'm not finished." Judge Whitfield's voice cracked like a whip. "Mrs. Ashworth, your petition claims concern for Grace Hollister's welfare. But your testimony focused almost entirely on attacking Mrs. Hollister's character and Mr. Hollister's judgment. You provided no evidence of actual harm, actual neglect, or actual danger to the child." He turned to Adelaide and Sam. "This marriage may have been hasty. This arrangement may be unconventional. But I see a family. I see a father who fought for his daughter's life. I see a mother, and yes, she is this child's mother in every way that matters, who sacrificed everything to save her. I see a baby who is loved, cared for, and thriving." Judge Whitfield picked up the petition. "This petition is denied. Grace Hollister will remain in the custody of her father and stepmother. Any further attempts to interfere with this family will be considered harassment and dealt with accordingly." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. "This hearing is adjourned." Adelaide couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The words echoed in her head, not quite real. Denied. The petition was denied. Grace was staying with them. Sam's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her close. She heard his ragged breathing, felt his body shaking with relief. "We won," he whispered. "Adelaide, we won." She looked down at Grace, at the baby sleeping peacefully through the most important moment of her young life. "Yeah," Adelaide said, her voice cracking. "We won." Behind them, she could hear Mrs. Ashworth's furious voice rising in protest, Judge Whitfield's calm dismissal, the murmur of the crowd processing what they'd witnessed. But none of it mattered. What mattered was Grace's warmth against her chest, Sam's arm around her shoulders, the future stretching ahead of them, uncertain and terrifying and full of possibility. They walked out of the trading post into autumn sunshine, a family forged in crisis and tempered by judgment, ready to face whatever came next. Orchestrated emotional narrative continuation, exploring deepening relationship dynamics and character psychology. The ride back to the ranch felt different than any journey Adelaide had taken before. The weight that had pressed on her chest for weeks, the constant fear of losing Grace, of being dragged back into invisibility, had lifted. In its place was something unfamiliar, something that might have been peace. Sam drove the wagon in silence, but it wasn't the tense silence of before. This was easier, softer. The silence of two people who'd been through battle together and come out the other side. "You were incredible in there," he said finally, his voice rough. "The way you stood up to them, the way you spoke." "I was terrified." "Didn't show. You looked like you were ready to take on the whole territory if you had to." Adelaide shifted Grace in her arms, feeling the baby's steady breathing against her chest. "I would have. For her. For us." Sam glanced at her, something shifting in his expression. "Us. We're a family now, ain't we? Legal and everything. Judge Whitfield said so himself." He did. Sam turned back to the road, but Adelaide caught the small smile crossing his face. He surely did. They arrived at the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the valley in shades of amber and rose. Adelaide climbed down from the wagon with Grace, her body aching from the long day, but her spirit lighter than it had been in years. "I'll put the horses up," Sam said. "You get her inside, get her fed." "Sam," Adelaide stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Thank you for believing in me, for letting me be part of this." "Thank you for choosing to be part of it." His hand covered hers briefly, warm and calloused. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." That night, after Grace was fed and sleeping peacefully, Adelaide found herself restless. She wandered into the main room, where the fire had burned down to embers, and settled into the rocking chair that had become her favorite spot. She was still there when Sam emerged from his room, drawn by the same restlessness. "Can't sleep?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. "Too much spinning in my head. Keep replaying the hearing, thinking about what could have gone wrong. But it didn't go wrong. It went right. Better than right." "I know." Adelaide wrapped her arms around herself. "But I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. Keep waiting for something to take this away." Sam was quiet for a moment. "You spent a long time having good things taken from you." "I spent a long time believing I didn't deserve good things in the first place." "Do you still believe that?" Adelaide considered the question carefully. "I'm trying not to. But 3 years of thinking you're worthless don't disappear overnight." "You ain't worthless." Sam's voice carried an intensity that made her look up. "Adelaide, you're the furthest thing from worthless I've ever known. What you did for Grace, what you sacrificed, what you risked, that ain't the action of someone worthless. That's courage. That's love. That's everything good about being human." Adelaide felt tears prickling her eyes. She blinked them back, but her voice came out thick. "Why do you keep saying things like that?" "Because they're true, and because I think you need to hear them." Sam leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes never leaving her face. Josephine used to say that words have power, that the things we say to people shape how they see themselves. For 3 years, the only words you heard were cruel ones. I reckon it's time someone started saying the kind ones. Josephine sounds like she was something special. She was. But you know what? Sam's voice softened. So are you. Different special, but special all the same. Adelaide didn't know what to say. No one had called her special since her mother died. The word felt foreign, like a garment that didn't quite fit, but that she desperately wanted to wear. "Tell me more about her," Adelaide said. About Josephine. About your life together." Sam settled back in his chair, his gaze drifting to the embers. "We met in Cheyenne. She was working at a dry goods store, keeping books better than most men twice her age. I came in to buy supplies, ended up staying 3 hours just to watch her work." Love at first sight? More like fascination at first sight. Love came later, built on all the conversations we had, all the dreams we shared. Sam's voice took on a distant quality. "She wanted things, Adelaide. Big things. A ranch of our own. A school for children who couldn't afford education. A life that meant something beyond just survival. When I proposed, she said yes on one condition, that we'd be partners in everything. Not me making decisions and her following. Partners." "And you were?" "We were. For 17 months of marriage and 2 years of building before that. We argued plenty, don't get me wrong. She had a temper like summer lightning, and I ain't exactly easygoing myself. But we always worked through it, always came back to the partnership." Adelaide absorbed this, trying to imagine the woman who'd occupied this cabin before her. The woman who'd planted the herb garden, hung the curtains, dreamed of schools and children and a future that never arrived. "Do you still talk to her?" Adelaide asked quietly. "In your head, I mean." Sam nodded slowly. "Sometimes. Mostly to tell her about Grace. About how she's growing. What new things she's learned." He paused. "Lately I've been telling her about you." "About me?" "About how you saved our daughter. About how you've brought this house back to life. About how—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. "About how grateful I am that you're here." Adelaide felt warmth spreading through her chest, unfamiliar and slightly frightening. "What do you think she'd say about me being here?" "I think she'd say thank you. I think she'd say she's glad Grace has someone who loves her so fierce." Sam met Adelaide's eyes. "And I think she'd tell me not to be an idiot about what's right in front of me." "What's right in front of you?" Sam was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled softly, the only sound in the cabin besides Grace's gentle breathing from the other room. "A woman worth knowing," he said finally. "A woman worth keeping. A woman who deserves a lot more than a marriage of convenience and a husband who's still figuring out his own heart." Adelaide's breath caught. "Sam." "I ain't asking for anything," he said quickly. "I ain't expecting anything. I know this started as strategy, as the only way to keep Grace safe. But Adelaide, I need you to know that it's becoming more than that for me. You're becoming more than that." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying—" Sam ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in the gesture. "I'm saying I look forward to coming inside at the end of the day and finding you here. I'm saying the cabin feels empty when you're not in it. I'm saying, watching you with Grace, seeing how you love her, how you fight for her, makes me think, maybe—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Maybe love don't stop when someone dies. Maybe it just changes shape, makes room for new kinds of love alongside the old." Adelaide felt tears spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them. "I'm scared, Sam. I'm scared of wanting this, of believing it could be real." "I know. I'm scared too." Sam reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. "But maybe we could be scared together. Figure this out together, same as we figured out everything else." Adelaide looked at their joined hands, his calloused and work-roughened, hers soft from indoor labor but strong in their own way. Two hands that had fought side by side, built side by side, held a baby they both loved with everything they had. "I'd like that," she whispered. "Being scared together." Sam's grip tightened on her hand. "Then that's what we'll do. No rush, no pressure. Just two people learning to trust each other. Learning to hope again." Grace's cry split the quiet, demanding attention that transcended complicated adult emotions. Adelaide rose automatically, but Sam stood too. "Let me," he said. "I'll bring her to you." Adelaide watched him disappear into the nursery, heard his low voice murmuring comfort to his daughter. A moment later, he emerged with Grace in his arms, the baby already quieting at the familiar presence. "She's hungry," Sam said unnecessarily, handing her over. "She's always hungry." Adelaide settled back in the rocking chair, positioning Grace to nurse. "This child eats like she's making up for lost time." "She is making up for lost time." Sam sat back down, watching them with an expression Adelaide was learning to recognize. Wonder. Gratitude. Something that might have been love, though neither of them was ready to name it. They sat like that until Grace fell asleep again, Adelaide's body doing what it was made to do, Sam keeping quiet vigil beside them. When Adelaide finally looked up, she found his eyes still on her face. "What?" she asked softly. "Nothing, just, this is good. This moment. This life we're building. It's good." "It is," Adelaide agreed. "Better than I thought anything could be again." The weeks that followed the hearing brought changes both subtle and profound. Word spread through the territory about Judge Whitfield's decision, and the story took on different shapes depending on who told it. Some painted Adelaide as a manipulative woman who'd trapped a vulnerable widower. Others saw her as a hero who'd saved an innocent child. Most simply filed the Hollister household under complicated but functioning and moved on with their own lives. Mrs. Ashworth retreated from public view, her influence in Silver Ridge diminished by her very public failure. Adelaide heard through Maggie, who visited monthly now, that the older woman was directing her reforming energy toward other targets: the saloon, the gambling hall, anyone but the family she'd tried and failed to destroy. "She's still bitter," Maggie reported one afternoon, bouncing her own daughter on her knee while Grace played nearby. "Still telling anyone who'll listen that the judge was wrong, that you're both unsuitable, that Grace would be better off with proper people." "Let her talk," Adelaide said, surprising herself with how little the word stung. "I've got better things to worry about than Cordelia Ashworth's opinion." "Look at you," Maggie smiled. 6 months ago, you would have crumbled at the thought of her disapproval. 6 months ago, I believed I deserved disapproval. I don't anymore." Grace chose that moment to pull herself up on unsteady legs, using the edge of the table for support. Adelaide's heart lurched with pride and fear as the baby teetered, then found her balance. "She's getting so big," Maggie said. "Walking before you know it." "She's determined, this one, just like her mama." "Which mama?" Maggie asked gently. "Josephine or you?" Adelaide considered the question. "Both, I hope. I want her to have pieces of both of us. Josephine's fire and my stubbornness. Josephine's dreams and my practicality." "And what about Sam? What pieces does he give her?" "His loyalty. His determination to do right by the people he loves." Adelaide smiled, watching Grace navigate the edge of the table with fierce concentration. "His complete inability to give up, even when giving up would be easier." "Speaking of Sam," Maggie's voice took on a teasing tone, "how are things between you two? Beyond the practical arrangement, I mean." Adelaide felt heat rising in her cheeks. "Things are progressing." "Progressing how?" "He kissed me last week." Maggie let out a sound that was half gasp, half laugh. "Adelaide Hollister! And you're only telling me now?" "It wasn't a big kiss, just a small one. We were saying goodnight, and he looked at me, and then—" Adelaide shrugged, but she couldn't suppress her smile. "And then he kissed me, quick and gentle, like he was asking permission." "And? What did you do?" "I kissed him back," Maggie practically bounced in her seat. I knew it! I knew there was more than partnership between you two. There's starting to be, Adelaide's voice softened. He's patient, Maggie. So patient with me. He knows I've got walls up, knows I'm scared of wanting too much. He just keeps showing up, keeps being kind, keeps proving that maybe I can trust this. Can you? Trust it? Adelaide watched Grace successfully navigate the full length of the table, then plop down on her bottom with a surprised expression that made both women laugh. I'm learning to, she said. One day at a time. That night, after Maggie had headed home and Grace was settled for sleep, Adelaide found Sam on the porch, staring up at the star-filled sky. Room for one more? She asked. Always. She settled beside him on the bench he'd built last month, close enough that their shoulders touched. The autumn air was cool but not cold, carrying the scent of pine and wood smoke. Maggie thinks we're sweet on each other, Adelaide said. Are we? Ain't you? Sam turned to look at her, his face half lit by the lantern glow from inside. You know I am. Question is whether you're sweet on me. Adelaide considered playing coy, considered deflecting with humor, but they'd built something too real for games. I am, she said simply. More than I expected. More than I thought I could be. Sam's hand found hers in the darkness. Adelaide. I know it started as strategy. I know we got married to protect Grace, not because we chose each other. But somewhere along the way, she took a breath. Somewhere along the way, I started choosing you anyway. When? I don't know exactly. Maybe when you defended me at the hearing. Maybe when you started kissing me goodnight. Maybe when I realized I look forward to seeing your face every morning, more than I've ever looked forward to anything. Sam was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Josephine's been gone 9 months now. Some days it feels like yesterday. Some days it feels like a lifetime ago. You're allowed to grieve her, Sam. You're allowed to love her and miss her and wish things had been different. Loving me don't erase that. I know. I just... He turned toward her, his free hand coming up to cup her face. I want you to know that this ain't about replacing her. This ain't about finding a substitute for what I lost. This is about you, Adelaide Crawford Hollister, the woman who saved my daughter, who saved me, who turned this house back into a home. Sam, I'm falling in love with you. The words came out like a confession. Not because you're convenient, or because you're here, or because I need someone to help raise Grace. Because you're brave and stubborn and kind and fierce. Because you make me laugh again. Because when I think about the future, I can't imagine it without you in it. Adelaide felt tears on her cheeks, but for once they weren't tears of grief or fear. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. I've been scared to admit it, scared to even think it, but it's true. It's the truest thing I know. Sam kissed her then, not the quick, questioning kisses of before, but something deeper, something that felt like a promise, like a beginning, like coming home after a long journey. When they finally pulled apart, Adelaide was trembling, not from cold, from the enormity of what was happening, from the terrifying, exhilarating reality of letting herself want something again. What happens now? She asked. Now we keep building, keep learning each other, keep figuring out what this is and what it can become. Sam pressed his forehead against hers. Now we stop being scared of being happy. I don't know if I can stop being scared. Then be scared. Just don't let the fear stop you from reaching for what you want. Sam pulled back enough to look into her eyes. What do you want, Adelaide? If you could have anything, what would it be? Adelaide thought about the market square in Silver Ridge, about 3 years of invisibility, about a baby dying in a stranger's arms, and the moment she decided to step forward instead of staying safe. "This," she said. "I want this. You and Grace and this ranch and this life. I want to belong somewhere. I want to matter to someone. I want to build something that lasts." "Then that's what we'll do." Sam stood, pulling her up with him. Together, as partners, as a family. As husband and wife? As husband and wife who actually chose each other. Sam smiled, and for the first time since Adelaide had known him, the smile reached all the way to his eyes. Not because we had to, but because we wanted to. Adelaide let him lead her inside, let him close the door against the night, let herself believe that this was real, that she was allowed to have this, that happiness wasn't something that would be snatched away the moment she dared to claim it. Grace stirred in her cradle as they passed the nursery door, making small sounds of contentment. Adelaide paused, looking in at the baby who'd brought them together, who'd transformed both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. "She's got your stubbornness," Sam said softly. "Already. And your determination. And both our love." Sam wrapped his arms around Adelaide from behind, holding her as they watched Grace sleep. She's gonna grow up knowing she's wanted, knowing she's loved, knowing she's got 2 parents who'd burn the world down to keep her safe. Is that what we did? Burn the world down? We burned down the parts that needed burning. The judgment, the cruelty, the lie that some people deserve love and others don't. Sam pressed a kiss to Adelaide's temple. We built something better on the ashes. Adelaide leaned back into his warmth, feeling his heartbeat steady against her spine. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago. Invisible, worthless, convinced that the best parts of life were behind her. That woman was gone now. In her place was someone new, someone stronger, someone who'd learned that worth wasn't something granted by others, but something you claimed for yourself, one brave choice at a time. "I love you," she said, testing the words, feeling how they fit in her mouth. "I love you, Sam Hollister." "I love you too, Adelaide Hollister." His arms tightened around her. "Today, tomorrow, whatever comes after." Grace sighed in her sleep, her tiny hand curling and uncurling against her blanket. Adelaide smiled, feeling something settle into place inside her, something that had been broken for 3 years, finally healing. This was family. This was home. This was everything she'd stopped believing she deserved, delivered in the form of a dying baby and a desperate cowboy, and the terrifying choice to step forward when everyone else turned away. Orchestrated final story resolution, showcasing family transformation and emotional closure. Winter came hard that year, burying the valley in snow that reached the cabin windows and trapping them together for weeks at a time. Adelaide had expected to feel claustrophobic, imprisoned by the weather and the isolation. Instead, she found herself grateful for the forced intimacy, for the long evenings by the fire, for the slow unfurling of 2 hearts learning to trust each other. Grace turned 1 year old during a blizzard that howled outside for 3 days straight. Adelaide baked a small cake from their dwindling supplies, and they celebrated with candles and singing, and the pure joy of watching a baby smash frosting into her hair. "She's got your determination," Sam said, laughing as Grace systematically demolished what remained of the cake. "Won't stop until the job's done." "And your stubbornness. Look at that face. She knows exactly what she wants." "Wonder where she gets that from." Sam caught Adelaide's eye, his smile softening into something more intimate. "Both her mamas, I reckon." Adelaide felt the now familiar warmth spread through her chest. Sam had started doing that lately, referring to both her and Josephine as Grace's mothers. At first, it had made her uncomfortable, as if she was claiming something she hadn't earned. But gradually, she'd come to understand what he meant. Grace had two women who loved her fiercely, one who'd given her life and one who'd saved it. "You think Josephine would approve?" Adelaide asked quietly. "Of how we're raising her?" "I think Josephine would be grateful her daughter has someone who loves her as much as you do." Sam reached across the table, wiping frosting from Grace's cheek. "And I think she'd tell me I'm a lucky man to have found you. Even though I ain't what anyone would call conventional?" "Especially because of that." Sam met her eyes. "Josephine never had much patience for conventional. She'd have liked you, Adelaide. I'm sure of it." Spring thaw brought new beginnings in more ways than one. The snow receded, revealing a valley hungry for attention after months of neglect. Sam threw himself into ranch work, repairing winter damage, preparing fields for planting, rebuilding fences that had collapsed under the weight of ice. Adelaide worked alongside him when Grace's needs allowed, her body growing stronger from outdoor labor, her skin tanning under the high mountain sun. She'd never been a small woman, would never be delicate or dainty, but she was learning to see her size differently now. Not as failure or inadequacy, but as strength, as capability, as the body of someone who could work hard and love harder. It was during spring planting that Adelaide first suspected she might be pregnant. She kept this suspicion to herself at first, afraid to hope, afraid to speak it into existence and risk having it snatched away. But as weeks passed and the signs grew more certain, she found herself standing in front of the small mirror in their bedroom, one hand pressed against her belly, tears streaming down her face. Sam found her like that, came up behind her with concern creasing his forehead. "Adelaide, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She turned to face him, taking his hands in hers. "Sam, I think I might be carrying your child." The silence stretched for one heartbeat, 2, 3. Then Sam let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pulled her into his arms so tight she could barely breathe. "Are you sure? Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor. I've missed my courses twice now. I'm tired all the time, sick in the mornings." Adelaide pulled back enough to look at his face. "I know it's soon. I know we ain't been married that long. If you're not ready—" "Not ready?" Sam laughed, the sound full of wonder. "Adelaide, I've been dreaming about this, about building a family with you, about giving Grace brothers and sisters, about filling this house with children who know they're loved. But after what happened with my first pregnancy, the baby who died, what if we face whatever comes together?" Sam cupped her face in his hands. "I can't promise nothing bad will happen. Life don't work that way. But I can promise I'll be here. Every step, every moment, every fear. We'll face it together." Adelaide felt something crack open in her chest. Something that had been walled off since the day she'd buried her son. Since the day William had walked into the mountains and never returned. "I'm scared, Sam." "I know. I'm scared too. But being scared together is better than being scared alone. Right?" "Right." Adelaide smiled through her tears. "Being scared together is always better." News of Adelaide's pregnancy spread through their small circle of friends and allies. Maggie Foster arrived within days of hearing, her own belly round with her third child, bearing gifts of baby clothes and practical advice. "I knew it," Maggie said, embracing Adelaide with the fierce affection that had grown between them. "I told Thomas, mark my words, next time I visit that ranch, Adelaide will be expecting." "How'd you know?" "The way you looked at Grace at her birthday celebration. Like you were imagining what it would be like to have another one." Maggie grinned. Plus, Sam couldn't stop touching your belly. Dead giveaway. The Brennans sent a letter of congratulations from Pine Creek, along with a package of fabric for baby clothes. Even Judge Whitfield, when Sam encountered him on a supply run, offered gruff well wishes and a promise to perform the christening when the time came. But not everyone celebrated. Word reached them through Maggie that Mrs. Ashworth, upon hearing the news, had declared the pregnancy proof of God's punishment to come. "That woman can't carry a child to term," she'd reportedly told anyone who would listen. "Mark my words, this will end in tragedy, same as before." Adelaide heard the gossip and felt the old familiar shame trying to rise. But this time, she pushed it back down. "Let her talk," Adelaide told Sam when he came home furious from hearing the rumors. "Her words don't have power over me anymore. The only thing that matters is this family, this life, this baby growing inside me. You're stronger than you were a year ago." "I had to be. Grace needed me strong. You needed me strong." Adelaide touched her belly, feeling the slight swell that was just beginning to show. "This baby's gonna need me strong too. This baby's gonna have the strongest mother in the territory. And the stubbornest father. Runs in the family." Summer ripened into fall, and Adelaide's belly grew round with new life. Grace, now walking confidently and babbling in an incomprehensible mix of words and sounds, was fascinated by the changes in her mama's body. "Baby," Grace would say, patting Adelaide's stomach with her small hand. "Baby in there." "That's right, sweet girl. You're going to be a big sister." "Big sister." Grace nodded solemnly, as if accepting a sacred responsibility. Adelaide marveled at how naturally Grace had adapted to the idea. Children were resilient that way, she supposed. They accepted change with a flexibility that adults lost somewhere along the journey of growing up. The labor came on a cold November night, earlier than expected, but not dangerously so. Sam rode for the midwife while Adelaide paced the cabin, breathing through contractions that felt like waves crashing against her body. "You can do this," she told herself, gripping the back of a chair as another wave hit. "You've done harder things. You've faced down crowds who wanted to destroy you. You've stood in courtrooms and fought for your family. You can do this." Maggie arrived before the midwife, having somehow heard through the territory's gossip network that Adelaide's time was near. She burst through the door with her practical manner and her steady hands, immediately taking charge. "How far apart?" "5 minutes, maybe less." "Water's on to boil?" Sam put it on before he left. "Good man. Now, let's get you comfortable." The labor was long and hard, but not the desperate struggle of Adelaide's first pregnancy. This baby was strong, positioned correctly, ready to enter the world. And Adelaide was strong too, stronger than she'd been 3 years ago, her body tempered by physical work and her spirit forged in the fire of fighting for her family. Sam returned with the midwife just as dawn was breaking. He rushed to Adelaide's side, taking her hand, his face pale with terror. "I'm here. I'm right here." "I know." Adelaide squeezed his hand through another contraction. "I knew you'd come." The baby arrived with the sunrise, a healthy boy with a lusty cry and a full head of dark hair. Adelaide held him against her chest, feeling his warmth, his weight, his undeniable aliveness, and wept with a joy so profound it bordered on pain. "He's perfect," she whispered. "Sam, he's perfect." "He is," Sam's voice cracked, "just like his mother." They named him William Robert Hollister, after Adelaide's first husband and the son she'd lost. Not to dwell in grief, but to honor what had come before, to acknowledge that this new life was built on the foundation of old losses. "William," Adelaide murmured, tracing her son's tiny features with one finger. "Your namesakes were good men who deserved better than they got. But you're going to have everything they didn't. a family that stays, a love that lasts, a mother who knows what it costs to get here. Grace met her brother with the same solemn acceptance she brought to everything. She touched his tiny hand with careful fingers, studying his face like she was memorizing it. "Baby brother," she said. "My baby brother." "That's right, sweetheart. He's yours to help protect." "Protect," Grace nodded. "I protect." Adelaide looked at Sam over their children's heads, saw her own overwhelming emotion reflected in his eyes. "We did it," she said. "We built this. All of it." "We did. Together." 2 years after that day in the market square, Adelaide stood on the porch of the home she'd helped transform, watching Grace chase chickens in the yard while William napped against her chest. Sam was repairing fence posts at the far end of the property, his figure small but familiar against the mountain backdrop. She thought about the woman she'd been when this started. Invisible. Worthless. Convinced that her body was wrong, her presence unwanted, her very existence a burden to be tolerated rather than a gift to be celebrated. That woman was gone now. In her place stood someone Adelaide barely recognized. A wife. A mother. A partner in building something real and lasting. A woman who took up space without apologizing, who spoke her mind without cringing, who loved fiercely and unapologetically. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had come in increments, in small moments of choosing courage over fear, in standing up to Mrs. Ashworth, in agreeing to marry a stranger, in confessing love to a man who'd lost everything and somehow found space in his heart for her. But mostly, the transformation had come through being needed, through Grace's absolute dependence, through Sam's quiet partnership, through William's perfect arrival into a family that would never let him doubt his worth. Adelaide had spent 3 years believing she was useless. Now she knew the truth. She wasn't useless. She was essential, not despite her body, her history, her scars, but because of them. Every wound she'd survived had made her capable of compassion. Every loss she'd endured had made her capable of gratitude. Every moment of invisibility had made her capable of truly seeing others who felt unseen. Sam finished his work and started walking back toward the cabin. Adelaide watched him approach, feeling the familiar flutter of affection that had become as natural as breathing. "Deep thoughts?" he asked, climbing the porch steps. "Just thinking about how much has changed." "Good changes or bad?" "Good. All good." Adelaide shifted William in her arms, making room for Sam to settle beside her. "I was thinking about that day in the market square, about how terrified I was to step forward." "But you did it anyway." "I did it anyway." Adelaide leaned into his warmth. "I keep wondering what would have happened if I hadn't. If I'd stayed in my corner, stayed invisible, let Grace die rather than risk the judgment. Then I'd have lost everything. Grace, this ranch, any reason to keep going." Sam's voice roughened. "You saved more than my daughter that day, Adelaide. You saved me. You saved me too. You just don't know it." "How?" "By needing me. By letting me matter. By seeing past all the things the world said I was and finding something worth keeping underneath." Grace came running up, breathless and giggling, a chicken feather stuck in her hair. "Mama, Mama, I caught one!" "You caught a chicken?" "Almost caught." Grace held up her hands, demonstrating the near miss. "This close." "That's my girl. Next time you'll get her." "Next time," Grace agreed, with Sam's stubborn determination. Then she spotted her brother and immediately softened, climbing onto the bench to peer at his sleeping face. "Baby William's sleeping." "He is. He had a big morning." "Big morning," Grace nodded wisely.
"I help watch?"
"You can help watch." Grace settled against Adelaide's other side, her small body warm and trusting. Adelaide looked at her family, this impossible family she'd built from the wreckage of old grief and new courage, and felt something she'd spent years believing she'd never feel again. Complete. "Sam?" "Yeah?" "I love you. I don't say it enough, but I love you. Every stubborn, determined, loyal inch of you." Sam's arm tightened around her shoulders. "I love you too. Every brave, fierce, beautiful inch of you." "Beautiful?" Adelaide laughed. "Now I know you're lying." "Ain't lying." Sam turned her face toward his expression serious. "You're the most beautiful woman I know, Adelaide Hollister. Not because of how you look, but because of who you are. Because you chose love when you could have chosen safety. Because you chose courage when you could have chosen invisibility. Because you chose us when you had every reason to choose self-protection instead." Adelaide felt tears prickling her eyes. "You're going to make me cry in front of the children." "Let 'em see. Let 'em know their mama feels things deeply. Let 'em grow up understanding that love is worth crying over." Grace, ever attentive, noticed the emotion on Adelaide's face. "Mama sad?" "No, sweetheart. Mama's happy. So happy it comes out as tears sometimes." "Happy tears?" "The happiest kind." Grace considered this, then nodded with acceptance. "Good tears. Happy good tears." Adelaide laughed, pulling Grace closer, feeling William stir against her chest, feeling Sam's solid presence beside her. This moment, this family, this life she'd fought so hard to build and protect, this was worth everything she'd sacrificed. This was worth every judgment she'd faced, every cruel word she'd absorbed, every moment of invisibility she'd endured. This was home. Maggie visited a week later, bringing news from Silver Ridge that Mrs. Ashworth had finally moved to Denver to live with her daughter. The woman's influence in the town had crumbled completely. Her crusade against the Hollister family remembered as an embarrassment rather than a righteous cause. "Good riddance," Adelaide said without heat. "I hope she finds peace wherever she goes." Maggie raised an eyebrow. "You're more forgiving than I'd be." "I used to spend a lot of energy hating people who'd wronged me. Turns out, that energy is better spent loving the people who didn't." Adelaide smiled at Grace, who was showing Maggie's daughter her collection of interesting rocks. "Mrs. Ashworth did me a favor, in a way. She showed me what I was capable of when I had something worth fighting for." "Look at you, philosophical in your old age." "I'm 36, Maggie. That ain't old." "Old enough to know better, young enough to not care." Adelaide laughed, the sound easy and free in a way it never could have been 3 years ago. That night, after the children were asleep and the cabin was quiet, Adelaide and Sam sat on the porch watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. It had become their ritual, these evening moments of peace before bed. A time to talk, to plan, to simply exist together. "I've been thinking," Sam said. "Dangerous habit. About building an addition to the cabin. William's going to need his own room eventually, and if we have more children—" "More children?" Adelaide turned to look at him. "You want more?" "Don't you?" Adelaide considered the question. A year ago, the idea of more children would have terrified her, would have felt like tempting fate, inviting loss. But now, with William healthy and thriving, with Grace growing stronger every day, with her own body proving capable in ways she'd never dared hope. "I do," she admitted. "I want as many as we're blessed with." "Then we'll need more room." Sam's hand found hers in the darkness. "I want to build something that lasts, Adelaide. Something our grandchildren will inherit. Something that says the Hollisters were here, and they built something good." "We already are building something good." "Then let's build something bigger." Adelaide squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses she'd come to love, the strength she'd come to rely on. "All right," she said. "Let's build something bigger." 3 years after that day in Silver Ridge, Adelaide stood in the same market square where everything had changed. She'd come to town for supplies, leaving Sam with the children, facing for the first time the place where she'd been invisible for so long. The square looked smaller than she remembered. The corner where she'd sold pies seemed insignificant now, just a patch of dusty ground like any other. The well where respectable women had gathered to gossip was just a well, its power to wound diminished by time and distance. "Mrs. Hollister!" Adelaide turned to find a young woman approaching, her face vaguely familiar. "I'm Sarah Brennan, Jonas and Hattie's granddaughter. They've told me so much about you." "Good things, I hope." "The best things," Sarah smiled, warm and genuine. "They say you're the bravest woman in the territory. They tell everyone about how you saved that baby when no one else would help." Adelaide felt something loosen in her chest. The story had changed. Somewhere along the way, she transformed from villain to hero in the territory's collective memory. Not because she'd sought redemption, but because the truth had eventually won out over gossip. "I just did what needed doing," Adelaide said. "Anyone would have done the same." "No, ma'am, they wouldn't have. That's what makes it remarkable." Adelaide finished her shopping and loaded the wagon, preparing for the long ride home. But before she left, she walked one more time to her old corner of the market square. She stood there for a long moment, remembering the woman she'd been. Invisible, ashamed, convinced her body was wrong, her existence a burden, her worth determined by what others thought of her. That woman had died the day she'd stepped forward to take a dying baby from a desperate father's arms. In her place stood someone new, someone who knew that worth wasn't something granted by others. Worth was something you claimed, something you proved through the choices you made when no one was watching, through the courage you showed when everything was at stake. Adelaide climbed onto the wagon seat and took up the reins. The road home stretched ahead of her, familiar now, beloved. She didn't look back at Silver Ridge as she drove away. There was nothing back there she needed anymore. Everything that mattered was waiting for her at a ranch in a beautiful valley, where a stubborn rancher and 2 perfect children were building a life that nobody had believed they deserved. When Adelaide arrived home, Grace came running to meet her, William toddling behind on unsteady legs. Sam emerged from the barn, his face breaking into the smile that still made her heart flutter after all this time. "Mama's home," Grace announced. "Mama came back." "I'll always come back," Adelaide said, lifting her daughter into her arms. "Always." Sam reached them, taking William onto his hip, his free hand finding Adelaide's waist. They stood there for a moment, the 4 of them, a family forged from crisis and tempered by love. "Good trip?" Sam asked. "Good trip. Saw some old ghosts. Laid them to rest." "And now?" Adelaide looked at her family, at Grace's fierce determination, at William's curious eyes, at Sam's steady presence, at the home they'd built together, the life they'd created from nothing but courage and desperate hope. "Now we live," she said. "Really live. Without fear, without apology, without waiting for permission to be happy." Sam kissed her forehead. "Sounds like a good plan." "It's the only plan that matters." Grace squirmed to be set down, immediately grabbing William's hand to show him something important in the yard. Adelaide and Sam watched their children together, 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of old lives and built something beautiful from the pieces. "I love you, Adelaide Hollister," Sam said quietly. "I love you too, Sam Hollister." The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold and rose. In a small cabin in that valley, Two children laughed while their parents watched. And a woman who'd once believed she was worthless finally understood the truth. Worth wasn't something the world gave you. Worth was something you claimed. And Adelaide Hollister had claimed hers with both hands, holding tight to the life she'd built, the family she'd chosen, and the love she'd been brave enough to believe she deserved.